Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. Glad to be here. Glad to see you. This is episode number 33. It is Monday, May 13th, 2024. Happy Monday. Hope you're doing well. Glad to see everybody. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're returning, glad to see you back. Now, make sure you go grab a snack and a drink if you need one to get you through the content. And with that being said, let's go ahead and flip over to my screen and get into the content. All right, so first article here, cyber threat landscape permanently altered by Chinese operations, U.S. officials say. Even if the U.S. government eventually ejects a notorious Chinese hacking operation that has tunneled into critical infrastructure entities, the sweeping digital campaign has permanently altered the cyber threat landscape, federal officials say. The hacking activity labeled Volt Typhoon remains a major focus of federal national security leaders who have scrutinized the group's capabilities as well as its intent to cause disruption and societal panic, especially in the event of a military conflict, and concluded Beijing will not back away from that approach in the future. The end result, this article says, is that that China has moved beyond the traditional goal of nation-state hacking operations, spying on an adversary, into something more sinister, the officials say. So, in cybersecurity, right, and threat intelligence and all these things, one of the most important things that you need to do is understand your risk, right? Understand your threats, who is interested in whatever you do in your business, in your operations, because that's going to guide and influence a whole bunch of things that you're going to do in your security program. Types of controls that you're going to implement, the way that you're doing things, the types of vendors that you use, right? All of those things are going to be impacted by that aspect of your program. Now, this article also gives a quote here. It says, when you think about the scope, scale, and sophistication of the PRC, so China, or even the Russians, they're always going to be pursuing their end goal objectives, according to David Luber, head of the NSA's Cybersecurity Directorate. So yeah, you have all of these different motives, right? And certainly with governments, they are always looking at each other, right? And different countries, China, Russia, North Korea, they all have their different interests, right? Or things that they're interested in seeing, especially even like the United States, right? United States, Europe, all the countries, right? It's not just those countries, but there's always different motives as far as why people do the things that they do, right? That's part of what cyber threat intelligence is, or threat intelligence is building profiles on these different institutions, different governments, different entities, companies, all those things, right? Groups. It says that such technical state-backed breaches with a desire to compromise insecure or end-of-life devices to then pivot into more sensitive networks could well become the new norm in an assessment shared by law enforcement. So specifically targeting end-of-life devices. We've seen this a lot, right? On this show, we've talked about it a whole bunch. But just in general, it's been a thing that's been out there. Why is that? Because end-of-life devices are low-hanging fruit in a lot of cases. Because once they go end of life, that means there is no support for those devices. So developers, manufacturers, they are not creating updated patches. And we know over the life cycle of software and services, applications, products, all those things, that just because it's not vulnerable today does not mean it's not going to be vulnerable tomorrow, right? New vulnerabilities are always discovered. And if you're not actively updating or maintaining code base and products and things like that, well then, yeah, they're just going to become more and more vulnerable over time. And it's going to be very trivial to go ahead and exploit those. So that's the thing with hackers, right? Is one of the things that they're interested in is going after the low-hanging fruit. If they don't have to put in a bunch of effort, and they can breach like a Windows XP system or something, they're going to do it, right? And that's why you have to be very cautious with end-of-life devices, applications, all of those things within your organization. Just leads to increased exposure and an increased attack surface in your organization. So next article here, Okta's security chief on the company's own cyber attack and how the battleground has shifted. Okta is one of the largest security companies in the world, helping big name clients in the public and private sector protect themselves. But the company has had several of its own security incidents, including the most recent last October. That's when unidentified nation state attackers used stolen Okta credentials to access customer files that had been uploaded to the company's support case management system. Stolen files replicated browser activity and contained sensitive data, including cookies and session tokens that malicious actors can use to impersonate valid users. At the RSA conference in San Francisco this past week, Okta Chief Security Officer David Bradbury sat down with Recorded Future News to discuss the incident, how nation-state threats are evolving, and how AI is already influencing identity-based attacks. So we're not going to dive into the whole interview here. Definitely go check it out if you're interested in learning more about it. But there's a few interesting points in here, right? What we've seen over the last year is that the traditional attack is always pre-authentication. They're going after your password. They're coming after you directly. What we're seeing now is a shift away, and this is from this person, shift away from that and actually more into post-authentication. So the idea is that they're not going to try and target your login page anymore or your passwords or your credentials. They're actually just going to go straight to your browser and steal that little session token cookie that's in your browser. And then they're just going to copy it and paste it into their own browser and access all your applications. This is a post-authentication attack. So we've seen attack passwords, right? Going after passwords, trying to brute force them, trying to crack them, stealing password dumps, right? Password dumps getting posted on the internet and having those be reused for other attacks. We've seen that, right? That's a very traditional kind of thing. Now, what this person is saying, what David Bradbury is saying, is that instead of that, right, when you authenticate to an application, you essentially get this session token or identifier that with the server recognizes that as an authenticated token saying, hey, this person has logged in, right? So what David Bradbury is saying is that these attackers are going to go for those, right, those authenticated tokens. And then that way, they're just going to automatically be authenticated. They don't have to use the compute power to crack the passwords or brute force them or anything like that, or phish you into giving your password or all that stuff, right? Don't have to do that. So that certainly is an interesting shift. You know, I think one of the reasons why we might see this kind of shift, or why it makes sense that some attacks are going towards this process, is because we look at a company like Okta, right? Okta is specifically around two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, SSO, right? Single sign-on, all those kinds of things, so that it increases the security around the login process, right? So maybe when I put in my password and my email address or my user account, I also have to give this multi-factor authentication code in order to actually be able to log in to the service, right? We are strengthening that because we know passwords are super vulnerable, right? We know that is such a weak security control in the grand scheme of things, right? There's been all kinds of articles, research, everything around that. And so we've seen, try to lengthen your password, make it longer, make it more complex, all those kinds of things, right? So with something like Okta, that kind of strengthens that. So if an attacker can go after a user account or a login process after the fact, right? Let you go through all those steps, get you all logged in, make sure it's all good to go. And then we'll just steal the token after the fact, right? We'll make it a little bit easier to go ahead and get in, and it'll take less work on the attacker side, right? And then they'll still be able to accomplish the same thing. So it is interesting to see that kind of shift and see that just that shift of focus. But it's not surprising, right? When you think about those other things, it makes sense, right? It also says, and so this is where threat actors are going to start shifting to. So I think there's a positive and a negative. I think the positive is, as an industry, we've done a pretty good job with multi-factor. So the reason why I highlighted this and I wanted to bring up this is because I don't necessarily agree, right? I think multi-factor authentication in general, right? The idea of it, the concept of multi-factor authentication, absolutely, right? There are a lot of good services that really help this be an effective kind of measure, right? What I don't agree with it though, right, is the implementation or the execution of it. There are still so many companies that don't require it, that don't, if they're building an application or a service or something, they don't require it right away. They don't enforce users to automatically set it up as soon as they log in. So I think there are still massive gaps in the actual implementation of these kinds of systems. So it's like, it's kind of, I think maybe it's because it's Okta, right? So they're saying we've done a tremendous job at this, which again, Okta is a tremendous product, right? A lot of great things about it. But I don't think as an industry and the implementation aspect of it, I don't think we're quite there to where, it's solved, right? Like where it's not a guarantee that multi-factor authentication is going to be enabled. So it's an interesting point. It's one that I wanted to bring up, one I wanted to really hammer on, because in your company, or if you go work for a company, right? Maybe you're not working in the career field right now, it's not unlikely that you're gonna that you might see some things that don't have multi-factor authentication in there, right? That's not uncommon. And so I think especially as a new professional or as an existing professional, right, you need to not kind of be complacent with how things are, right? And understand that you still could see things that don't have multi-factor authentication. And that's just as dangerous, right? That is so dangerous still, right? That problem has not gone away. So keep that in mind. All right, next article. As of May 2024, BlackBosta ransomware affiliates hacked over 500 organizations worldwide. And also, too, just a quick interjection here. Make sure that you go to cyberthreatintel.com if you want to see the article feed for these articles. So the articles that we cover, as well as some other articles and all the platforms that we're on. So again, cyberthreatintel.com. All right, back to the article here. As of May 2024, BlackBosta ransomware affiliates hacked over 500 organizations worldwide. BlackBosta ransomware affiliates have breached over 500 organizations between April 2022 and May 2024, FBI and CISA reported. BlackBosta has targeted at least 12 critical infrastructure sectors, including healthcare and public health. The alert provides tactics, techniques, and procedures, so TTPs and indicators of compromise, IOCs, obtained from law enforcement investigations and reports from third-party security firms. BlackBosta Ransomware as a Service, RAS, has been active since April 2022. It impacted several businesses and critical infrastructure entities across North America, Europe, and Australia. As of May 2024, BlackBosta has impacted over 500 organizations worldwide. So we've talked about these kinds of things in the past on previous episodes, and especially critical infrastructure, right? There is an increased focus on critical infrastructure these days, and it's just going to continue to increase because we're not quite there with the security of those things, right? So that'd be like your power grid, your waste management kind of services, right? Trash services, all those kinds of things. Water plants. In December 2023, Elliptic and Corvus Insurance published a joint research that revealed the group accumulated at least $107 million in Bitcoin ransom payments since early 2022. According to the experts, the ransomware gang has infected over 329 victims, including ABB, Capita, Dish Network, and Rheinmetall. The researchers analyzed blockchain transactions. They discovered a clear link between BlackBosta and the Conti group. So one thing that we do see a lot of times is with different groups, right? They kind of evolve, they kind of shift, they change leadership, they change names, they try to change some of their tactics, right? And make it a little bit more obfuscated as far as who they are. So basically so they can keep running, right? It's kind of like the criminals you'd see on the movies where they would go like rob a train and just kind of keep bouncing around to different cities and stuff. Same kind of idea, right? They just are trying to remain undetected, but continue their operations under a different brand, if you will, right? So, but a lot of times they don't do a good enough job to cover their tracks, right? From an OPSEC standpoint, so operational security. And then there's some kind of link between those different groups or how they've evolved. And then it becomes clear that, hey, maybe this is the same group or same group of people. and because they're using the same comment structure or same accounts or same wallets or something, right? There's some kind of link. And that's why you see too with like criminal enterprises, right? It's like follow the money trail. That's a common saying because a lot of times there are links in there that you can, if you can decipher whatever is being done, you can, you basically identify that it's the same groups. And so that's pretty common, right? So, but it is interesting to see here with BlackBosta and Conti. Conti's well known. BlackBosta is pretty well known at these days. All right, let's keep moving here. Next article: notorious threat actor Intel broker claims hack of the Europol. Notorious threat actor Intel broker claims that Europol has suffered a data breach that exposed FOUO and other classified data. Hacker said that the compromised data includes FOUO, so for official use only, and other classified data such as Alliance employees, files related to recon, and guidelines. Intel Broker has offered to sell confidential and highly critical logs packed with credentials, including SMTP access, PAuth access, and SSL passkeys and certificates for a total price, and this is why this is interesting, of only $20,000 in cryptocurrency, right? We see a lot of these ransom requirements or ransom payments for massive amounts of money, right? We've seen so many large ransom requests from these groups or various ransomware groups to their victims. Yet this is only for $20,000, right? It's an interesting shift, right? Especially when it's things like classified data, right? Maybe it's looking at their victim and saying, okay, we think they can only pay this, so we're only going to require this payment versus a massive company. So like an OCTA, right? Let's go after OCTA and then say, we want, $1 million or something. That's kind of the thought process, right? I think, right? I don't know, because $20,000 is a substantial discount compared to a lot of other kinds of attacks like this, right? Data leak attacks. All right, next article here. Ascension Healthcare takes systems offline after cyber attack. Ascension, one of the largest private healthcare systems in the United States, has taken some of its systems offline to investigate what it describes as a cybersecurity event. Pretty standard stuff, right? As a major U.S. nonprofit health system, Ascension operates 140 hospitals and 40 senior care facilities across 19 states and the District of Columbia. It also employs 8,500 providers and 35,000 affiliated providers and 134,000 associates. So it's pretty large, right? In 2023, it reported a total revenue of $28.3 billion. There's a quote here: out of an abundance of caution, we're recommending that business partners temporarily suspend the connection to the Ascension environment. We will inform partners when it is appropriate to reconnect into our environment, the nonprofit added. So this is kind of an interesting thing, right? A lot of times when we see a company get breached that has connections out, right? So let's think of something like a SolarWinds, right? Because that's a major example. So think about all the supply chain and how these systems are connected. When a company gets breached, a lot of times we don't see, especially in public, a notification saying, hey, suppliers, or if you're a customer or if you're connected to our network, go ahead and disconnect that connection just so we can make sure that we know exactly what's going on. Typically there's no kind of announcement like that. Do we see that happen? We might see that happen behind the scenes, but as regular people out in the world, professionals that aren't associated with those, we might not see that. And I don't know that necessarily happens, right? So it's an interesting kind of shift where we are focusing more on vendor risk security, vendor risk management, and all these third-party risk management practices, right? And supply chain security and all that. But again, we don't always see that. So it's an interesting stance, right? It caught me off guard when I saw it because, again, we don't see that. I like that. I think that's an interesting kind of, it's kind of an interesting comment, right? Like an interesting approach to this, to making sure and trying to help your suppliers or other connections be secure or remain secure, hopefully, right? Because you don't want your people who are connected to your network, you don't want them to get breached too. That just gets worse and worse for you, especially if you're on the hook for that connection and why they got breached, right? So very interesting. Next article, Dell warns of data breach, 49 million customers allegedly affected. This is a big one, right? Dell is warning customers of a data breach after a threat actor claimed to have stolen information for approximately 49 million customers. The computer maker began emailing data breach notifications to customers yesterday, stating that a Dell portal containing customer information related to purchases was breached. And so they go through and show the article or the email. Dell states the following information was accessed by the threat actor during the breach: name, physical address, Dell hardware and order information, including service tag, item description, date of order, and related warranty information. It also says the threat actor said they stole data from the computer maker for 49 million customers and other information systems purchased from Dell between 2017 and 2024. So one of the things that I'll ask you and propose to you is, have you purchased anything from Dell? Have you received any kind of email from them, including warranty information, right? I have seen people say that they are receiving emails from Dell about warranty information and expiring warranty contracts and those kinds of things. So I'm curious if you've seen that, right? Have you seen those emails come through? As the database is no longer being sold, so they have taken it down, right? There is a good chance the threat actor is attempting to monetize it in some way through attacks. So, it's always interesting to see kind of how these things all evolve, how they happen, right? How the attack vector that was used to get into these systems, and also the lessons learned, right? Are you learning from your breaches? Always an important thing, right? Go back to that incident response process. Next article here, Boeing confirms attempted $200 million ransomware extortion attempt. The cybercriminals who targeted Boeing using the Lockbit ransomware platform in October 2023 demanded a $200 million extortion payment, the company said Wednesday. So remember, $20,000 in that other article that we were talking about for Europol, $200 million for Boeing. That's a big shift, right? Boeing confirmed to Cybersecurity that it is the unnamed multinational aeronautical and defense corporation referenced in an indictment unsealed Tuesday by the U.S. Department of Justice. The indictment, which identified Dmitry Yurovich Khrushchev as the main administrator and developer behind the Lockbit ransomware operation, which we've talked about before in the show, was part of a sweeping international array of actions against the Russian national that included sanctions in the US, the UK, and Australia. Boeing reportedly did not pay any ransom to Lockbit after roughly 43 gigabytes of company data was posted to Lockbit's website in early November, according to Bleeping Computer. Boeing confirmed a cyber incident to Cyberscoop at the time that the company said was impacting elements of our parts, and this is a quote, of our parts and distributions business, adding that it did not affect flight safety. The company has never commented on the stolen data posted by Lockbit. It also says the reference in the indictment to the unmanned company was an example of the extremely large ransom demands made by Khrushchev and his co-conspirators as they racked up more than $500 million in ransoms paid by victims since late 2019 or early 2020. So they made a lot of money off this, right? And we have talked about Lockbit recently and how these names have been uncovered and how they're really going to go after these people, right? These people have caused a lot of heartache, a lot of problems for companies using Lockbit, right? It's not trivial, and it is going to be one of those things where if the authorities can get their hands on these people, they're really going to punish them, right? So it'll be interesting to see if they are able to bring them to justice. All right, so that is the last article for this episode of Cyber Threat Intel. Again, I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 33. It is Monday, May 13th, 2024. Again, Go to cyberthreatintel.com if you want to see the article feed for everything that we've covered in all the episodes, as well as some other articles. But with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of Cyber Threat Intel. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.